Hello, everybody. This is Professor Hassey. It's Tuesday, May 23rd. It's the beginning of our week 8 and final week of Business 630 here at the University of La Verne. A lot of things on our plate this week. Most importantly, the electrics case, and that's what we'll be concentrating some of our work on. Also, we'll be talking today about leasing, the final alternative to capital strategies that companies can use to generate assets and use of assets. Talk briefly about that, even though, again, as I indicated last week, we will not have any assessments on leasing. It is an alternative. So for let's example, let's say if you cannot agree on the capital budget analysis of the electrics case, you could say that instead of allocating $17 million on equipment to build the new product, you can lease that equipment and maybe perhaps make your costs go down. That's one that could be an alternative in your electrics case. We will talk about the electrics case today, but also in our Friday video, which will be posted Friday morning, May 26th. Grades, case number 3 grades have been posted, and the course evaluations are going to be due May 30th. Please take a look at that. The links are in your Blackboard all over the place. So if you could do your evaluations once you complete all your requirements for our course, I would appreciate it. And then Thursday, June 1st, I will post the final grades for our class. For some of the seniors who are graduating at commencement this Saturday, you don't have to worry. You're posted for your diploma. It just makes it official once I put in the grades for the course on June 1st, and then it's official, and then they'll mail you your signed diploma, and all will be well. Again, the diploma you will receive on Saturday is a University of La Verne diploma, but it will not be signed. Everybody's will not be signed, including undergraduates, awaiting all the final grades of the semester or of the session. And once those grades are posted the first week of June, then they will send you your diploma signed and sealed, and all will be well. So that's what we need to do this week, is clean up electrics case. Some of you have been sending me samples or drafts, and I appreciate that, and getting some feedback to you all. So let's take a look at where we stand right now in our Blackboard. Okay, the last week you'll have to worry about Blackboard and work with it. But again, as I've indicated, this Blackboard site will be open until 2025. So if some of you are taking additional courses in your MBA program, excuse me, this file or this folder will be open. And if you need any references or can go back in and look at information, this will be available to you, and even available to you. But even if you graduate and come across some capital budgeting techniques or capital financial management strategies, you have access to this platform or this Blackboard file folder for our class for 2 more years. So if you need it, it's available to you. So where we stand in class right now, as many of you are aware of, we're down to our last few things of course assessment case paper, which is due this coming Sunday. And again, there will be no extensions on that. This is an APA formatted paper to answer a series of questions in the case. And how you answer those questions is by completing a spreadsheet format. Again, course evaluations are due May 30th, and then I will post the grades June 1st. Speaking of evaluations, you click on these links if you're in CRN 2626, where most of you are in CRN 111. You click on that, and they'll give you an opportunity very briefly to complete the evaluation of our course, and I appreciate that. Also this week, we have in week 8, we have a subject of lease financing. There's a good video about that if you're interested in lease financing. There's a spreadsheet that we'll look at in just a minute. And then there's this little ditty that I throw in the last week of a financial management class. It's what I call the circle of life of business. If a business had a life of 24 hours, I know some businesses that have a life of less than 24 hours, but we won't talk about those. But if let's say, assume a business like General Electric, Ford, Apple, whatever, has a life of 24 hours. What is the circle of life? What is the time span of going on at different times during the day of that business? This is kind of an interesting way of looking at financial management, capital fundraising, financial strategies of a corporation. A company begins its life by creating capital from angel investors, from your own money, the entrepreneur, at 12 a.m. And then it goes on to operate, demand more capital, begin to need more capital, maybe private capital. That's when they go on at Shark Tank at 6 in the morning, company time. Then they keep making profits with that additional private capital, and then they have more demand on their business. They go IPO, they go public. And usually about halfway through the day at 3 p.m., they've maximized out on their value. They're at their most valuable portion. Now, this is a tough one in the real world because just recently Apple maximized their wealth at around a little bit over $1 trillion, but they keep growing. So 3 p.m. is kind of a tough one to call because you never really know when you maximize your true value of the company. But when you do, eventually it will start going down. And when it starts going down, you need happy hour to get you through it. But then as you decline and your business model becomes old, you begin to look for mergers, acquisitions, restructuring, hopefully not bankruptcy, and then you call it quits of the company. So this is kind of an interesting viewpoint of looking at the circle of life of a business in a 24-hour perspective. Kind of gives you a little bit of idea. If you take General Electric, which was begun in 1875 and still going strong today, their day into 24 hours would be spread out over 130 years, 140 years. So it's really interesting to see correlate this with an actual business. And one of the things I do in an entrepreneur class that I teach is I give the circle of life and I ask the students in the company that they work for, where do they think their business is in the circle of life? Are they at 3 a.m.? Are they at 3 p.m.? Are they at 8 p.m.? Where are they in their interpretation? That's kind of an interesting thing to study. And we do that in our entrepreneur class. Okay, let's take a look at the electrics case briefly. Okay, many of you are now at the point where you're finishing up and getting your spreadsheets going. You've determined what the weighted average cost of capital in with a capital structure of debt to equity of 1.5, determining the cost of debt after taxes, determining the cost of equity, and determining your weighted average cost of capital. You've also determined your depreciation schedule, which is based on the MACRS depreciation schedule of the IRS, which is an 8-year asset class with different percentages being allocated over those 8 years of percent of the 17 million, in this case, our investment. And then those percentages total 100% and you fully depreciate the asset during the course of the 8-year project of the Electrics Incorporated. There's no salvage value in the case. And then you begin, and we've talked about this, of setting up your spreadsheet. And we've talked about recording those variables in many ways like we did in case 3, but you need to concentrate on one key variable that you need to add another line on, and that's the warranty cost. Remember, the warranty is a different cost than labor, than parts, than fixed costs. Warranty is for each unit, and each unit produced from years 1 through 8. Remember, they're producing 40,500 units a year in the average or base case scenario, that each one of those units has a 5-year warranty. So you sell a product in 2023, it has a warranty for 5 years. You sell a product in 2025, it has a warranty for 5 years, and so on. So how do you get the cost of those 5 years into one number and show that as an expense item on your capital budget analysis? It's another type of expense. Well, because it's 5 years, you have to do a discounted cash flow, taking those 5 years of cost, both on the motor and the controller unit, and determining what those 5 years of costs are in one number, discounted using the net present value method to determine that amount. And whatever that amount is, you multiply that per unit amount times 40,500 units, and that's your dollar amount of warranty cost every year. And it'll be the same every year. Why it can be the same? Because you're incorporating those costs in every unit produced. Now, naturally, you should take into account inflation in that 5-year time span, building in the 3% inflation, and your discounted cash cost of capital would be your weighted average cost of capital. So once you get that solved, the rest of it's pretty easy. You just complete the various return analysis and come up with your number. And that base case then would be the basis to do your scenario analysis, your sensitivity analysis with the two variables given in the case, and complete the spreadsheet in 9 tabs, each tab showing different things that to me, the reader, and to the Electrics Incorporated people can see your analysis into a 9-step process, and then you're going to reinterpret that analysis in your paper. So those are the things you need to be working on by Sunday. Now, I strongly urge all of you, if you've not even begun to do this, is to get the spreadsheet out of the way this week. Leave Saturday and Sunday for the writing. The writing shouldn't take long if your case is organized into these 9 tabs of where you can explain the questions that are being asked. The only research involved in the paper is about the cost of energy. Question number 1. That shouldn't take you too long. So you need to make sure you get this organized and have a nice disciplined approach as you finish out your writing. Now, granted, we have many students in this class that are going through commencement and graduation this weekend. Hopefully you've accounted for that in your time management and you can get all that done before you start celebrating with your family, and rightly so, this weekend. All right. So that's an important concept. Here it's Tuesday. If you're graduating this weekend, you should pretty well wrap all this up by Thursday. And for those students who do post early, I will get the grades of those as soon as I can, so you have a good idea how you ended up in this class. So the quicker you post, every day I'll review who has posted and I'll do those grades. You know where you stand in class right now, right up to date through case number 3. So that's been posted to Blackboard. All right, again, I stand ready for this Tuesday night and Thursday night with any questions or comments you might have, and we'll go forward as we complete our course this week. Now I want to take a little bit of time on this opening video to also talk about lease financing, and I'll conclude that in my update video on Friday. Remember, and none of this material is being assessed again, but you could technically think about it in your electrics case as an alternative to paying out $17 million to purchase the equipment. Could this been done in a leasing format? So remember, leasing is where you have the access to assets, buildings, land, equipment, computers, phone systems, without purchasing them. You rent them. And many of us rent. We can't afford a home, we rent an apartment. We can't afford a car, we lease a car. We can't afford to purchase a computer, we lease a computer. And what's the difference mainly between a lease and owning an asset? You have no control of it. In other words, you have to pay the lease in order to keep the asset. You can't depreciate it, you don't own it. You can't sell it or fix it up whenever you want to. Somebody else owns it. You have to get approval before you do that. And then also a lease is for over a specific period of time. So yes, you lose control over the use or operation of that asset, but at the same time, you have the ability to use an asset without paying or going into debt to acquire it. And that's why people rent apartments. That's why people buy lease cars. They don't have enough money or credit to buy the assets, so they lease it and still get the same value of that property. So one of the key financial analytical strategies is, should we lease and should we buy? For small businesses, leasing is a definite option. They don't have enough capital, enough credit, enough collateral to go out and buy assets, so they lease it. Larger corporations pretty well use their big credit, use their pull in the market for volume and capital or cash management, and they can go out and purchase these things. But for smaller businesses or mid-sized businesses, leasing is the deal. For my company, when I first started my business way back when, the first 5 years, I did not own any assets. I rented my office space. I rented my office furniture. I rented my computers. I leased and rented my computer system or my phone system. But then as I acquired capital, developed credit, develop cash, then I started going out and buying assets. And then I had the luxury of depreciating those assets, getting a tax break. So that's the general rule is leasing. But for many companies, sometimes if you have a quick project or a quick way of doing things, you might lease an asset because you're not going to need that asset after a couple of years in regards to that project. So many times, even large corporations lease some assets for a particular job, a particular customer, a particular product. And then once that product is dissolved or finished with, then you just get rid of you don't have the lease anymore, and you don't have a bunch of assets that you got to try to sell. So that's an important thing. So that's what leasing is all about. And it adds a lot to a financial management strategy because if you have that option of leasing, perhaps you can save some money. Perhaps you can determine whether that lease is more valuable as a rent than a purchase. Now, as a rent, though, you lose a lot of tax advantages. Depreciations for one. But even when you rent or lease something, you do get a tax advantage because it's an operating expense. It's a deductible operating expense of the business. So these are important strategies. And I know a lot of you who rent apartments or lease cars or do whatever, you probably know a little bit about leases and you're locked in by the lease agreement. But at many times it gives you the luxury to get that better car or get an apartment in a community that you want to live in and be able to go about your business. So that's what leasing is about. And it's a very important concept in finance. We'll talk more about that in our Friday video. But I want you to concentrate this week, especially before Friday, on getting this electrics case wrapped up and being able to move on and put this out of your, you don't have to worry about it. And again, I'll be available this week for drafts or for any consultations. Thanks, everybody. Have a good week, and we'll talk to you again on Friday, and maybe I'll see you in our student hours. Have a great week. Bye-bye.